Hi, thank you for looking in on my ramblings and listening to me. I'm really grateful actually. It's nice to be given an opportunity to talk. These talks that I do are often completely unrehearsed, and today I want to talk about Black Lives Matter. And I'm just going to talk about some of my own experiences as a probation officer, and I'm going to broaden it out a little bit. I'm just going to talk about some of the discrimination and things that go on that possibly you're not aware of, or so I think it's quite good to make people aware of the sort of things that go on. And also, but I just want to broaden it out and just sort of really, I just feel we just need to be nicer towards each other and more considerate and more empathetic towards each other in this world of today, and just a little bit less selfish. And the Black Lives Matter issue highlights this really. So it's not about being sectarian or anything like that. It's about, come on guys, let's all be a bit nicer to each other and get rid of some of this nastiness that's around, okay? And yes, as I'll point out at the end of my little talk today, there is still quite a lot of nastiness around even today. But what I'm going to do now is talk about some of my experiences as a probation officer and things that I learned. You learn from the people that you work with, And there was a guy, I call him David. He was about my age. He had similar interests to me. He had a similar way of talking as me, and in many ways we were alike. But there was one difference. I was white and he was black. The first time I met him was on the Isle of Wight, in a prison on the Isle of Wight. And I don't think the prison authorities would admit to this nowadays, but in those days people were sent to the Isle of Wight as a sort of punishment. Prisoners who were a bit awkward were sent there, and it was, to get to the Isle of Wight, it was quite difficult for families to visit. And the prison regime where he was, nothing really happened. The prisoners were kind of pretty much bored out of their minds. So when I went to visit him, he took a long time to come, and he was deliberately awkward, and I had to wait for a very long time for him to come. And I'd come a long way to see him, and I was a bit disappointed, and he was a bit awkward. Didn't want to talk to me. Why are you asking me questions like that? Later, when I saw him back at my own office, I said, what was all that about, And he said, well, we were so bored at that prison that we used to just be deliberately awkward, and it was our way of rebelling. And he said, you probably don't realise what it's like to be black. And I said, well, okay, tell me about it, tell me about some of the things you've been through. And he said, well, are you sure you want to hear about it? And I said, yeah, go on, So, and David told me all these stories. David's not his real name, but David was a lovely lad as a youngster, okay? And when he grew up, he loved music, Motown, reggae, the Beatles, all that kind of era. He was really an expert about music. And in his sort of mid to late teens, he saw an advert in the paper, assistant required in a local music shop, which was wonderful. And you had all these LPs there. Anyway, phoned up, and he had a lovely chat with the owner of the shop, the guy, and they were talking about music. And the guy said, I can't wait to meet you for the interview. It's obvious you know a lot about music, he told David. I shall really look forward to interviewing you. Can you come down tomorrow? I think you're just the sort of person I need at my shop. Anyway, David goes along, goes to the shop, and the guy says, I'm sorry, you can't work here, you're black. And in fact, he swore at him. He said, go away with the F word, and don't come back. Terrible, isn't it? And that's actually unlawful these days. So that's David's story. So I've got lots of little stories, just examples. But David said to me, how would you feel? And I guess I'd feel hurt, angry. I mean, how would you feel if you went along to a job interview and somebody said, no, we don't want you. You're white. Don't want white people in our shop. Or black or what have you. So he said that's just a start. That's just the start of some of the stuff I went through. But how disappointing, And I guess my view is that the shop owner is the real loser here. What a stupid attitude. Okay, next story was I was working in a quite a busy town in the home counties. Imagine a home counties town that was quite busy. Quite a small black population. And I had this guy, he was, in his early 20s? And he'd been in trouble, but he was really making a big effort to stay out of trouble. And he came in and he said, do you know what? The police keep coming to my house and saying, you've done this crime. Where were you? What have you done? You. So every time a crime was committed by a black person in this town, the police would come and give him a knock and pull him in and start questioning him. And he said, they hate me, the police. They got it in for me. And I said, no. I said, do you know what it is? Their intelligence, the police intelligence, is not very good. And they're not being very sophisticated here. I mean, a lot of these crimes are not the sort of crimes that you've ever committed. They're not your sort of crimes. And they're just pulling you in because you're black. And when a black person is committing a crime in our area, they're presuming it's you. So, and you mustn't get angry. Just see them. When you look at the police, just think, I'm better than you. I'm more intelligent than you. And you're going to prove them wrong. Okay, so we had to devise an action plan. So what we did was I got him to draw up a diary, and he used to have to keep a diary of all his activities every day, what he used to do, where he was, at what time, and who with, as proof, you see, so that next time they came and knocked, he'd say, and I had to rehearse with him how to react. So he couldn't run away. In America, these guys have been running away and they've been shot at. You have to, and I had to, we rehearsed him being really polite, scrupulously polite with the police, and not allowing himself to be provoked. Now, not saying that the police provoked him, but some police actually perhaps do provoke people. Push them on the shoulder like that. We know it's you. Trying to bait them into, in other words, a policeman's kind of pushing him, saying, come on then, hit me. And you can't allow yourself to fall into that trap of hitting the police officer, because, that is a serious offence. So he had to learn to be assertive and calm and show him his diary of his activities. The other thing was really what I was keen for him to do, and all people to do, is one way of combating discrimination actually is to get an education and to become really good at something. Okay, so I was really keen for him to do evening classes or do something that he loved doing and getting a qualification in it. And even the police get to know, go, oh, Peter, this black guy who we normally assume is always doing the crimes. Well, hang on a minute. The guy who did the crime is much smaller than Peter. And also Peter's now going to college. He's studying. He's doing the productive stuff. I'm pretty sure it can't be him. Okay? But poor guy, he was being, they were on him all the time. And to deal with that, we had to get him doing a diary. Can you imagine? A diary. But he actually later said just that thought, he initially thought they had it in for him. And he was really grateful to me. He said, I was so grateful to you for helping me overcome that feeling of they had it in for me, and I realised that you were right, that they didn't have much to go on, really, and the descriptions they had were weak, and purely just to come and get me because I was black. Later, the police in our area, what they did for prolific offenders was they encouraged people to wear GPS trackers. They're a bit like a watch. And the police could track where people were 100% of the time, providing that the tracker was fully charged up. And for somebody like Peter, this was ideal because he would be ruled out of crime. And interestingly, the police in our area were beginning to understand that just purely sending people to prison doesn't necessarily stop them offending, because they've got to come out again, and the chances are they're more likely to offend even more when they come out of prison. Prison can be a school of crime, it can be a brutalising experience, it can make people more violent, all those things. So, when people agreed to wear this tag, the police suddenly became very helpful to these people, and they were much more constructive, and they would even sort of point them in the right direction of getting jobs and things like that. And they wouldn't come knocking on them and annoying them all the time. So that was great. Right, I'm going to talk about another young man who he had a personality disorder. His name, I'll call him Robert. And he was chaos. I'd give him an appointment in the morning, and he would always come the last person just as our office was closing. And I think a few times even the office closed when he was still there, and he was rabbiting to me. And he was very, very intense, telling me all his problems and all that sort of thing. It was useful for somebody to soak up and listen to his problems, really going, and I was sort of pushing him, trying to usher him out of the building. And I'm sure a few times I was left all on my own with him, which shouldn't really have happened because of my own safety and things like that. And Robert had a very serious matter outstanding at court. It was the GBH matter, because he was quite young. He hadn't been remanded in custody, and he was absolute chaos. He'd forget all his appointments, his court hearings and all that sort of thing. And he'd forget to go to court, which meant that the court would issue a warrant for his arrest, and the police would go around his flat, and they used to go early in the morning, and he wasn't the best mannered person in the mornings, and he used to be a bit upset by the police coming into his flat, and he would sort of be shouting at them and things. And when they did it the second time, he pulled a knife out of his kitchen drawer and was going, "Keep away, you, what are you doing in here?" and all that. So next time he forgot his court hearing, the police went mob-handed. They went with 3 riot vans. The police all dressed up with armour, helmets, truncheons, all this body armour stuff, tear glass, all that kind of thing. And they go early in the morning, crash into his flat to arrest him, you see, to take him to court. So he came in to me and said, "Oh, Bernie, I forgot to go to court again. And police going to come round with, their riot mob to come and get me." And I said, "Okay." So I phoned the police and I said, "Look, would you like me to bring him down?" Here he is. I don't need body armour and all that to deal with him. I'm here on my own with him, and I can bring him down to the police station, or even better still, he can come in and surrender himself to you right now. How about we do that? And perhaps, in future, send a policewoman around by appointment, or put a little note in his door saying, you twit, come and hand yourself in, rather than going to the expense of turning up with 3, 12 guys, fully suited, body armour, tear gas. So that was the kind of guy. And I used to like telling this story to the courts, magistrates, say, well, you kind of think, probation officers are soft and namby-tamby types, but we're dealing with the same people as the police are, but we're going about it a different way. So what we did with Robert was, again, we did the bit about being assertive, not reacting violently, and we tried to get him to take more control of his life. So we equipped him with a sort of work planner diary type thing, a chart on the wall of what he had to do each day, and he had to cross it off, and to bring a bit more structure to his life. I remember talking about him to a psychologist, and she said, "Oh, it's typical of people with personality disorders. They come deliberately at the end of the day when you're feeling tired and knackered and really worn out, and all your energy levels are gone, and you kind of easier for them to deal with." So she said, "Look, Bernie, get him in first thing in the morning." And it kind of reminded me, when I did a stint at youth justice with young offenders, there was this young guy who used to come in about 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, saying, "I've got no money, I need money." And he'd be stamping, stamp, 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 "I need money, I haven't got enough." And just to get him to go away, they're feeling tired, they can't wait for the weekend. They used to just give him money just to make him go away. Whereas early in the week or early in the day, they said, no, you can't have money. This guy was quite sophisticated, and the sort of thing they used to do was he'd say, "Oh, I need money for sheets." So they'd send a young trainee social worker out with him to go and buy sheets, and then he'd give her the slip in the toilets, nip out the window, go back to the shop and say, "Mum wants her money back, she don't want these sheets anymore." The lengths he used to go to get money. And the stupid thing was, they would have been better giving him a little book, a little savings bank, and saying pocket money each week and learning to manage your money. But no, he had to have a reason for the money. He needed pencils or whatever. So, the way people in care are brought up isn't necessarily the best way. So there we are. So Robert, yes. Now, I remember this guy. He was in his 30s. He came from Africa. I'll call him Francis, and he had a surname a bit like Umdada Dilipo, and he had loads of qualifications in the printing industry, and he was desperate for work. And I remember sitting there, and we used to try and we filled in application forms. One, we put an application form with all his distinguished qualifications and work experience, which was pretty good. And the other one, we'd put in a different application form in the name of Tracy White, and with very bad handwriting and spelling mistakes and quite inferior qualifications. And guess who used to get offered the job interview? Tracy White. So Paul Francis wasn't getting an interview with these various companies purely because these people were going through the application forms and going, "We don't want a black African person here," And that's blatant discrimination, isn't it? Isn't that frustrating? And really, companies that do that discriminate purely on the grounds of race like that, deserve prosecuting, don't they? How would you feel? It's terrible. Now I'm going to talk about, I remember when I was training, there was a lovely young lad who was quite articulate. I call him Daniel, and he was Irish, and he spoke with a nice Irish family, and some of his friends were a little bit in trouble, and police used to target him. It's like they didn't have enough to do, and they used to target him, and it annoyed him, and he put a complaint in against a police officer for some behaviour that a police officer had done towards him. And rather than make the situation better, he said that it got worse, that he was annoyed almost on a daily basis by the police, and he was picked on by them, and that the police obviously felt they were justified in targeting him to stop crime. So he had a fantastic memory, this guy. So what we did was we kept a diary, and he'd come in and I'd type up a journal of all these incidents that occurred, and he would remember the policeman's name, their number, the time, and he remembered all these factual events, and he didn't really know which things the police could do and the things that the police couldn't do. So it was quite a useful exercise for him to learn what his rights were. And eventually he went and took this journal in to a senior police officer and say, look, this is what's going on. And the senior police officer was quite amazed, actually, that this young lad, Daniel, could keep such a journal. And he actually took action to stop this sort of thing happening, because Daniel was staying out of trouble and he was being picked on, and it was quite unfair. And some of the incidents were against police procedures and against the law, really. And the police officers concerned deserved sanction. I don't know whether, again, he was being picked on because of his age or because he was Irish, but I was just sort of broadening it out here. Another quite a nice story, there was a young Greek guy that I met. I say Greek, his parents are Greek, but he was born here. And I'll call him Andronicus. And his schooling was awful, and he was in trouble at school straight away, and I don't think he went to school much at all. And he had an awful lot of contact with the police, but what was amazing about him was he knew his rights. He knew when the police were wrong, and he used to tell them. He was what you call a barrack room lawyer, and he knew all the codes of practice that the police have to follow. He knew his rights. He knew the law. He was amazing, Andronicus. But academically, he was terrible. So anyway, eventually I persuaded him, look, he said, oh, I'd love to learn. I mean, what could you do? I remember saying to him, what would you love to do, if I had a magic wand? He said, oh, I'd love to be a lawyer, or civil rights, or helping people with their rights. And even, his solicitors knew him quite well. He'd be telling the solicitors what to do. So, anyway, I said, he said, I'd love to go to university. And I kind of humoured him. I said, okay, what you need to do is what they call an access course at college. So he brought in the application forms, helped him fill them in, and he successfully applied for the access course at college, and he had to do, it was like a broad range of subjects, before you could home in on the law. And if you passed this access course, then it could give you access into university. Anyway, I said, look, bring your assignment in, your first essay. Let's see if I can help you, help you with your essay writing. And, I used to struggle with writing and essays. Anyway, brought it in. And do you know what? It was amazing. I looked at it and it was brilliant. I said, did you write this? He said, yeah. Did you copy it out of a book or something? He went, no, I wrote this. I said, bloody hell, this is better than what I can write. You don't need my help, Andronicus. This is absolutely brilliant. Needless to say, I just kind of motivated him and encouraged him. But he didn't need my help in writing. He could write better than me. And needless to say, he passed his access course with flying colours, and he applied to go to university. And there you are, this guy who was a young tearaway in loads of crime. He got to do a degree course in law. And, for a probation officer, it's a lovely achievement, because that guy didn't have a single O-level to his name. Or GCSE. He didn't even have a GCSE or anything. And, and I don't think he barely went to school, and yet he was bright, and he could write. So I don't know what went wrong at school. Obviously, it was an absolute disaster, and he mixed with all the wrong uns. And his solicitors were really quite chuffed, and they gave him work experience, and he went to court. He said, "We don't want him here." And they complained about him, and the solicitors had to agree that they wouldn't take him to the local magistrates' court because they thought it might be an interference, or I don't know why. But anyway, the solicitors were really kind, and they helped him, and they used to take him on work experience to other courts than our local magistrate court. But that was a nice story. So there you go. A way of dealing with discrimination, I feel, is to get qualifications, actually, and better yourself, and not to fall into the trap of being provoked or falling into stereotypes, and this racism is still alive today. I mean, I met this guy on a plane. He's quite big in the music industry, and he gets bands from all over the world touring in the UK, and he got this black African band, and he thought, right, I shall get some black drivers to take these guys around. So he got these Jamaican guys to take these black African guys, and he had these beautiful Mercedes vans and minibuses that they went around Britain doing all their gigs and different halls and concert halls and things like that. Guess what? Police kept pulling them over because the drivers were black, and they said, "How come you're a black guy driving such a beautiful vehicle?" And I remember this black guy, I think he's of Nigerian descent, and he was a crime solicitor, and he had liked to show off his success, and he had a lovely BMW and gold bits and things like that, and I think even he used to get pulled over, him, and he was a very, very successful solicitor. And it's fact that if you're black, you're more likely to be stopped and searched. If you're black, the chances are you will be discriminated against, and it's sad. And it's even happening today, and I do this courier round, and it's quite nice because I've got to know quite a lot of the people in the local area. And there's this young French woman married to a young British guy, and she's just had a baby, and it's a very special time when you're having a baby, and you're very tricky emotional time, and you having just had a baby, you feel quite emotional and quite vulnerable, and this special time was shattered by somebody locally saying, "Why don't you F off back to your own country?" when this person heard her speaking French to her daughter. And it's not very nice, is it? It's horrible, isn't that horrible? And she was so upset that she was thinking of moving out of our town and going back to live in London over it, not feeling welcome in our area, and I think it's shocking. And recently I met a black guy who is transitioning. He's transitioning into becoming a woman, and he's at the beginning of that journey. And somebody was very, very horrible to him, transphobic, and threw a brick at him and was violent. And that's horrible, and this guy deserves every support, niceness and kindness and understanding, really. And he's had quite the opposite. And, it's one thing being black, and then to be a trans person it is, another as well, and he had this brick thrown at him and abuse, and he was crying, and the police came, and they were really supportive to him, which was nice. And they said to him something like, "You be proud of yourself. Go and put your shortest miniskirt off and get out there again, don't you get put down by them. You're going to achieve what you want to do. And I thought that was lovely, and very positive, and his doctors have been very supportive of him, and he's getting counselling, but he's gone through a really bad time, family have cast him off, won't speak to him anymore. Some people have been rude and abusive and horrible to him, or her, I should say, to her. Anyway, I'm going to end on that note. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you found it informative, and thank you so much for listening. I was going to start with a little joke. The poor black people in America put up with such a lot of rubbish and things like that. And some of the white supremacists regard black people as being not very bright and as being dumb and as being morons and things like that. And I was quite amused to see this picture of this guy. I don't know if you can see. And he's trying to say, get a brain, morons. But actually, it would appear that he's looking for Brian morons. Anyway. Diversity's a good thing. And let's all be kinder to each other. And thank you so much for looking on this, and do please subscribe to my channel, and do please put thumbs ups, and thank you for watching. I've been quite amazed by how many people have been looking in at my videos, so thank you so much, and I hope you've had a little insight to the sort of things that I used to have to deal with. And there's many more stories, there's a story of a guy who was Asian, and he had a really traumatic background. I think his dad was convicted of murder and things like that, and his mum died, and he was brought up by a white family, and his head was screwy, and he got all sorts of adventures, and I remember having to work with him, and he used to have outbursts and things like that, and he used to get quite angry, and poor chap, I remember some adventures with him, and I remember understanding how he felt, and he used to react quite badly, and we had to turn that badness into that energy into more positive ways of reacting. So, for example, if somebody was horrible down at the dole office, he'd react really badly, and he smashed their window. One day, he was looking at these nice new BMW cars at a motor showroom, and somebody told him to F off and blah blah, go away, and he went back later and smashed their window, and I had to kind of turn that energy around and say, come on, you've got to get even in a positive way by bettering yourself, by and we had to get more structure to his life and get him achieving things. So little things, step by step. I mean, one thing that we got him doing was improving his little flat, so his self-esteem went up, he decorated it nicely, the housing people were quite impressed how well he'd done it, and it was leading him towards perhaps getting a little job, and things like that, but not to go all the time like he was. It was reacting badly, and to try and rise above things. And I remember with this young black guy, really trying to get him to rise above police harassment, really, and to rise above it, and to be quite dignified and polite, and not to fall into the trap. So I guess people didn't realise those things kind of went on, but there you go. Anyway, that's my message. Let's all be nicer towards each other. Let's not tolerate, people saying horrible things, F off, back to your own country and stuff like that. It's degrading. And in fact, diversity is lovely. I actually thank the Lord for diversity. Just food-wise in this country. How would I cope without pizza and pasta and curries and French food and Italian food and Greek food and Turkish food? Just sausage and mash. and gravy every day? Nah. Anyway, do subscribe, and thank you for your support. Bye now. Bye-bye.